delighted to welcome Shaun Southall. You have many hats, and I think one of the good things about having a fireside chat. And by the way, welcome to the boardroom. Welcome to the monument.
Thank you very much.
How are you doing?
Great. Yeah. Thanks for having me. It's been a little while.
We're talking convergence, and you're someone who has an interesting background and an interesting augmented skill set. Let's get into it. Tell us about your journey.
I'm glad you find it interesting because I'm not sure I find it interesting at times. But yeah, I guess the reason for having me on is that convergence, which has taken place in my own career. Grew up programming in languages, which I think you'd have to look up on Wikipedia now to see what they are, because they're so outdated. And giving away my age here. The lighting, I'm hoping, is working against that. But yeah, that's how I grew up as an IT guy, really, and kind of fell into security, having hopes to go into languages. But as we discussed in the Circuit podcast, the route into being an interpreter or a translator was kind of swallowed up by Google, because they managed to get their algorithm pretty good. So
It's still not perfect, though, is it?
it's not perfect, but it's probably at least as good as I could manage on the fly. So I had this kind of background of taking bits of information, translating it into something which is more palatable, more manageable for the audience. So that kind of drifted me into sales, and moved into security sales, and then took a little bit more of a back step and went into a more strategic position, looking at cybersecurity elements within manufacturing. I was part of the first prison in the UK, which went from analog to IP. So there's a conversion milestone for you. And then spent the last 20 years in security. The previous 11, I think it was, before starting with the Civil Aviation Authority, was in physical security. But as has been the theme, I guess, throughout the day, physical security has transitioned into the attack surface. Convergence is a recurring theme over the last six years. This is the sixth one, I guess. And convergence has been going on for much longer, certainly in the attackers' eyes. The convergence is completely different. So now in the last 5 years, I started to realize that frameworks and standards were going to play a pivotal part in organizations' security posture, and kind of take the easy route to go down the framework.
Well, it's not easy, is it?
Well, the cyber assessment framework, the CAF, that certainly isn't easy for any aviation entities that are watching. It's quite a toll. But for me, in terms of upskilling, I specialized in getting organizations through 27001. And then the last 7-8 months has been focused on getting aviation entities through the CAF. So quite a bit of exposure there, and all those IT skills which I had when I was younger, they then came back into play. And then it's resulted in me now doing a role which I guess you could say is the equivalent to external audit. I'm working for the regulator, but I try not to beat with the stick. It's more about focusing on the organization's objectives and getting them a little bit further up the hill. And part of that is physical security as well. So the regulations which aviation entities have to adhere to include physical security, and cyber security is, as always, tagged on the end. So
well, yeah, but tagged on. Do you think that is increasingly a thing of the past? Because I know that I brought you on as a unicorn. Now I don't see you as a unicorn, right? In that you don't have all the but you are quite a rare breed of specialist, aren't you? Because you can be in both sides of the house. And what's interesting, you were on the Circuit Magazine podcast, and we have Paul Nito III on the call, who was also on the Circuit Magazine podcast on a similar kind of thing. Are you a unicorn, or can anyone do what you do?
I don't believe so. I mean, you've had Dawn Homes, and I guess.
And
as
Dawn's
well.
coming in here later. Yeah.
Dawn is another that through the maturity of different organizations, they realize that you can't manage information security and physical security as separate silos. You know, this is a recurring theme every year, which gets addressed at this very conference. To manage them as silos, and this comes back to the question, you know, how can technology bring convergence on? Yeah, if you manage it as a silo, you will ultimately see two cost centers, and two separate cost centers is really not the strategic outlook that you should be looking at when it comes to, you know, unified risk. And
but is the answer a unified professional?
I think there's an element of that, certainly. I think let's look at the anatomy of your average security team within an enterprise right now. I hate to draw on personal experiences because I shouldn't really be mentioning them, but yeah, you tend to have either you're very mature at one end, which have gone through the convergence process, and you know, take someone like John Blackbury. He's a traditional CISO that is responsible and accountable for physical security and information security, and see the whole piece holistically. And then at the other end of the spectrum, you've got organizations who physical security is still reporting into facilities, you know, the guys who replenish the toilet paper. So that's how physical security is seen from psychologically within the boardroom. It's a cost center. Then InfoSec is seen as an even bigger cost center. It's money that you throw at technology in order to try and appease the regulators, to try and reduce your cybersecurity risk. It's, you know, this kind of outlook is something that we have to shift away from, in my view, and I think in the view of probably every panelist that's been on, before we get to a point where, and the question was quite barbed. I wondered if it was a test to see if I'd watched the data miner presentation previously. But I think products like that are fantastic. But I think organizations have to learn to walk before they can run. Can you imagine how many alerts are coming into a SOC that doesn't have that kind of board direction, where you've got a governance structure which is dynamic, and it allows for a security department which isn't just seen as a cost center. It's seen as, I hate to use the word enabler because security doesn't enable the business, but should be seen as something to augment business units in order to achieve strategic goals. That goals cascade down from your business goals and your organizational vision, your enterprise architecture, should then filter down to your IT goals and your security goals. So,
but does that mean that it's got to be the same individual? I mean, I mentioned before, would you want to integrate finance with man guarding? Probably not. Would you want, I don't know, HR? Actually, well, HR and physical security, that would be a good combo because they're your eyes and ears, they're your spies.
HR in information security as well.
Yeah.
You know, in critical infrastructure, there's a prolonged vetting process that you have to go through before you can even work in it. I know myself from having waited for 6 months to get the clearance. Yes. So what we're talking about here is having everyone on the same page, having the organization looking at risk as a potential barrier or a conduit to achieving organizational objectives. Yeah, but if everyone's speaking the same common language, then that's something which needs to be dispersed throughout the organization.
But are you doing yourself a disservice in that what your skill set has become is not like Shaun can do Microsoft Word. It's much more complex, no, right? You know what I mean? Like it's not the type of thing where you're like, well, a man guard should be able to do a PowerPoint presentation as well as a finance chief. And surely, and you know, there is a big preponderance to say, oh, break down silos. It sounds good as a buzzword, but should we be building silos? Should we be not silos of communication, but silos of specialism? And saying, do you know what? Someone's been in the special forces. They have a cherishable skill set. but someone who has been, I know it's a pejorative term and whatever, script kidding, they have a cherished skill set too.
Yeah, and in some instances, you've got individuals who can apply analogous thinking to different roles, and then be quicker to pick up different elements or different concepts, and then become successful in whatever role they take. But we know the situation with this kind of skill shortage which we have in cybersecurity, right? It's a market where there's how many thousands of vacancies unfilled.
But is that because technology hasn't caught up? In that you don't have to compile your own binary, right? It's done.
Not anymore.
No, not anymore. Exactly. So as we make quantum leaps in that type of thing, it could make it accessible for someone like me with no training in that.
You've done some catches flags.
Yeah, no, I didn't do very well at all. I was rather rubbish, and I never got very far. But do you know what I mean? Is technology then going to help us solve this skills gap as it takes you to a certain starting point?
Well, I think technology has been the problem and the solution. You know, as I mentioned earlier, you know, more physical security hardware, which has traditionally been analog, has become IP based. So essentially, you've got IT looking over your shoulder. Then you've got a scenario where if information security is reporting into IT, or security is reporting into IT, that's a big problem because they have different strategies. IT is about building it cheaper and availability. Information security is completely different. It's about the preservation of the integrity and the all of CIA triad and the other the five, you know, 5D, whichever model you want to take. It's
for our audience, every time someone bants about the CIA triad, they're not talking about the Central Intelligence Agency, are they? Give them an overview.
Yeah, the confidentiality. So that's the protection of information, the protection of personal information, and it's referring more to privacy. Integrity, so the ability to alter data in a way, either accidental or deliberately, that affects a process. So something like that would be an example, would be maybe that you're able to access a piece of code and tell a centrifuge to work in a different way. And then see on availability, well, yeah, bringing down a server or a network is to cause chaos. So it's a slightly outdated concept, but CIA is something which all information security professionals will probably begrudgingly refer back to at various points.
No, sometimes we do buzzword bingo, and I thought that particular one, especially for some colleagues in the physical security community, you might want to band about because it belies maybe how I first interpreted it. You know, so on the podcast, which I would encourage everyone to subscribe to the Surrogate Magazine podcast, of course, it is a labor of love. You make reference to some accessible starting points for the uninitiated. If someone was on the physical side of the house thinking, do you know what, I'm never going to be a white hat hacker, but I can augment my skills. I look to Shaun and see his example. What is it that you
Wow. You're looking at me as a role model. I'm not sure that's happened for a while.
Why not?
So for me, it was diving into the technology and working in the physical security world. I just wanted to understand more. I think I said this on the podcast. It was stuff I did in my own time. So I started getting myself familiar with Linux, and then vulnerability scanning, looking for vulnerabilities in products, looking for vulnerabilities in my own organization's products, and then start getting in other organizations' products and getting comfortable with your basic security tools. And then that can kind of whet the appetite. If that's something that you're interested in, then you can take it that step further and get a bit more technical. But you don't need necessarily those technical skills. I think understanding the business is more important. You can have those kind of silos, as you've already mentioned, your specialists
Mm.
within different teams, and a security team should have a number of different specialists in different areas and transferable skills between those individuals where they can all learn from each other. Ultimately, for an organization, they have a mission and a vision, and getting them to that through that gap, or achieving the strategy, achieving their goals, they will look to deliver value and also mitigate risk as much as possible. And that has to come in harmony. So you have to have people talking, you have to have a dispersion of skills. And I think in security in particular, where you've got, as I said earlier, physical security reporting into facilities, it's just not, it's not ideal. People need to start getting their head around this holistic security piece.
Mm.
You will then naturally learn things. If you're from a physical security background, maybe you don't have an interest in it, but if you do, you'll start to pick things up from other people. And that's how I started. I started picking things up from other people, and then went away and ran with it, and started to do certifications.
Because it's much better that way around, isn't it? Otherwise, you say, right, my whole organization is going to undergo Microsoft Excel training. And like, why? Like, it's the cart before the horse. If you're in it and you say, right, I'm implementing this camera, now I need to look under the hood. Now there's a why. Is that more motivation?
Absolutely.
Or could people sit down and go on an online MOOC course and just wash themselves with something they never know if it's going to be applicable?
People do, and I speak from experience. It's very difficult to take certifications like ISACA and CIS without having previously had any experience in that field. It's not impossible. Sea Guides is the one which I did recently, and I mentioned in my podcast I would get there by the 1st of June, and I did.
You did.
So
well done.
I passed that a couple of weeks ago, and that was one that really draws on your previous experience, and more so my legacy experience from physical security, of that kind of board direction, steering, taking physical security executive management and giving them a voice within the organization, helping them to get more credibility and talk the same language in the boardroom. Because I keep coming back to it, governance is the showstopper. The technology is great, and I feel that when we get there, we've got products like Data Miner, which are fantastic. We saw the capabilities of it in the previous presentation. But from a governance perspective, you need to redefine what security value is all about. It's not about stopping burglaries. It's not about siloed, preventing a ransomware attack. It's about protecting the assets, delivering value, and then enabling business processes to flourish and achieve through the use of technology. Security's role within that is to guard against security risks when it comes to investment projects and programs to pursue the goals of the organization. That's what security should be doing. It shouldn't be seen as a cost center to stop the bad guys.
So that's encouraging, because that's convergence at governance level, and not trying to say, Manguard, you are not adequate because you cannot use an XDR platform, right? Because it's not what they're up to. It's not what they're doing. Now we've got a nice comment question. Paul says, do you see a technology team of the future with everything being connected from WPS, real estate, AV, physical security technology, and cyber, which also is rarely tested from a red team standpoint, especially with new integrations with IoT, HVAC, and building systems and access control?
I really hope so.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, I think if you're bringing in new technologies into your organization, and I alluded to it very briefly earlier, shadow IT is a big problem. I've seen it across practically every organization I've worked with, that you've got incomplete asset registers. If you don't have an idea of what you're trying to protect, that's a big problem. It's why you need it everyone harmonious and singing from the same hymn sheet, is because your enterprise architecture should determine the standards of a piece of equipment which is being brought in. it shouldn't get in the way of innovation. It should be there to encourage innovation and improve business processes. That's really the whole purpose of digital transformation. Security shouldn't be a blockade. It's not necessarily an either or. So yeah, I would love to see a scenario where you've got red team and purple team testing equipment before it gets rolled out. That's the kind of utopia. That's the unicorn, actually. You know, and I think it does happen in some instances. In fact, I know it does, but across every enterprise and every industry, no way.
No way. Well, you've heard it there from the unicorn himself. I like this, and I think this is a nice informal chat. We're here, we're in a boardroom, we're in the monument, we've got nice views. We can't show them because it messes up the lighting, but they are, Shaun, you can attest they are. I think this is a great format, and I want to continue it some more. But yeah, we are out of time. Shaun, thanks for coming in. I look forward to seeing you later on this afternoon and at our social event later. Let's give you a big virtual round of applause. And I say I'll put you back in the audience, but
I'm so happy there's no extra questions, but maybe it looks like there is.
you are in the audience already. We'll see you again very soon. Thanks, Matthew. Thanks, Paul.